It's time for another episode of Between Two Succulents, the only internet show that takes leading minds in literature and asks them existential questions about plants. Now, here's your host, the friendly neighborhood bookseller, Brandon Rashad Butts.
Woo! Hey, book friends, welcome to yet another episode of Between Two Succulents. Once again, Brandon Rashad Butts here with you, and I'm very excited to have our next guest with us this week. It's going to be a bit nerdy for you. I'm a bit of a history buff. That's why I went after this book in particular. So I hope you guys learned a lot today. Today, our guest is a writer and researcher who has worked across the country, quite honestly, and their work has appeared across a variety of national and international publications, such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Nation, Time, the Paris Review, the Guardian, the New Republic, New York Magazine's The Cut, Fortune, Village Voice, The Believer, and Lapham's Quarterly, among just a few others. She has reported stories from 4 continents on a range of cultural and historic topics, from present-day Liverpool to the history of the 60s in Greenwich Village. Everyone, please welcome Jess McHugh. Jess, thank you so much for joining us today.
Woo! Yeah!
Hi, happy to be here.
Awesome, cool. So, today we'll be talking with Jess about her literary book, her literary debut nonfiction work, Americanon, an Unexpected U.S. History in 13 best-selling books. And again, I told you I picked this one because I'm a bit of a history buff, and you might recognize Jess as like a jet-setting journalist that's gone literally all over the world in order to tell these amazing stories. So, in my opinion, she's probably not going to be too afraid to take on our very first segment that you guys all know and love around here that we like to call Aw Sucks. So, Jess, today your first challenge of the day is going to be to pick which one of our succulent VIPs based off of a description that our lovely announcer Joe will give you, and let us know which one that you would take to a well-received reunion of American classic literary artists and novelists and scholars. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, Joe. Let's introduce our succulent VIPs.
Jess, today you're looking at 2 beautiful succulents. First, we have the Fairies Washboard, a charming, compact succulent plant native to southern Africa. Fairies Washboard features a rosette of triangular leaves with distinct ridges. The leaves create a spiral effect that is quite dizzying when looking at the plant from above. Woo! The plant produces flower clusters in the summer, but the flowers are not showy. It grows best in bright light and warm, dry climates. That's really out of focus. There you go. That's a little better. Now, for our next succulent, we have Pepperomia Pincushion. It's a small, semi-succulent perennial species native to Peru in the rainforests of South America. The scientific name refers to its connection to the pepper plant. Other names include happy bean or green bean peperomia. The pincushion peperomia plant grows up to 12 inches tall and features narrow and slender and juicy lime green leaves, which are pea-pod shaped. It likes bright, indirect light and humidity, but it cannot tolerate direct sunlight or full sun. Yes, which one's speaking to you today?
Well, that explains why I just killed my happy bean plant. So I'm going to do the first one.
All right.
Awesome. Really nice choice, Jess. Rest in peace to your happy bean plant.
Emily Dickinson was her name.
Thank you. Awesome. Great. Thanks for playing, Jess. Now let's get into your book. Now, again, I'm really into history. I don't know if I call myself a history buff yet because I'm not ready for anybody's trivia team. But, I love the approach that you've taken to sort of kind of deconstructing the American condition. Media is one thing because it's really, especially in 21st century, it gets a lot of attention. But literature is really kind of like the original platform or the foundation for what it meant to create and develop a sense of identity, specifically in America, where the Southern American writer and other tropes are just held on to so justly and upheld to pretty much a high pedestal. Could you talk to us a little bit about what it was like finding the through line of literacy when compiling your research for the book and attacking America's identity, both transgressive and perpetuous, honestly?
Sure. Yeah, I love that description of transgressive and perpetuous, because it really is, the case. And I was interested in the idea of kind of a canon in a more broader sense. Like, I love talking about great books and great novels, but I was curious about, some of the books we might not think of as part of a canon, or especially not part of a literary canon. Books like an almanac or a dictionary or a cookbook or a self-help book. But these really were the books that sold, tens of millions of copies. And if you only had money for a few books, these were the ones that you would have bought. And so I was interested in the idea of, best-selling books, not just as pieces of literature, but as shapers of culture, as kind of elements of popular culture. And there were kind of a few themes that emerged throughout history. One of them, unsurprisingly, are a lot of the same ones that we think of as kind of American culture more broadly. So self-reliance, optimism. There's a lot of, control and conformity. There's also it's all kind of overlaid with this patina of aspiration. We love a good underdog story, a rags to riches story, whether that's, Benjamin Franklin or Dale Carnegie. And I think the kind of the last thing that I noticed was that many of the authors were hypocritical in some sense, whether they realized it or not. So Dale Carnegie, for instance, who's giving this advice to businessmen about how to win friends and influence people, he was poor, he was a farmer. This was not really his world. And that's kind of a theme that shows up again and again. Childless women saying women need to have children, or people from, a working class background saying you shouldn't be working class. And so, yeah, I would say that those are kind of the top themes that emerge.
Yeah, I love that, because it really just tackled, how we got to that point of, especially, very, very, I don't know. I think the best understanding that I had of it was thinking about the 50s, or like between the and the 50s, and just how life was then for a specific section of American culture. I just like, wow, specifically the use of the almanac, the use of Betty Crocker's cookbook, and so on. I was just like, that's really what drew me to it. The fact that it wasn't just Tom Sawyer and a lot of the other people who have also shaped the history
right.
of and one of your major objectives, I came to find, for this book was to kind of decipher that gap between reality and mythology in the American narrative. I'm kind of combating what we believe to have happened, or what we feel is what makes us an American, versus the actual steps and actions that we've taken to become an American by identity specifically. What would you say are some of the biggest fallacies that you found that we've applied to our development as Americans?
Sure. So I think in general, a lot of our identity has come out of a kind of denial or an amnesia of some of the darkest and most violent moments of our history, and has kind of painted a much sunnier picture of what occurred. And I think, one of the biggest themes that illustrates this is the self-made man. And I like to say that, use the word mythology, not in the sense of a myth that is untrue, but more in the sense of an allegory that's so flattened out as to be incomplete. And so, the self-made man is one of those tales that we tell over and over again. And it starts as early as the 18th century with Benjamin Franklin, but you see it even now. And it's not to say that it's untrue. There certainly are self-made men in America and self-made women in America. But I think I was curious about, how do we tell a story about the self-made man that takes into account things like generational wealth or institutional racism or gender bias? So I think one of my goals was trying to ask the reader, how do we complicate these sort of oversimplified ideas that we have about our identity?
Yeah, definitely. And rather than flattening it out, like you said before, because we, as a human race, we are definitely much more three-dimensional than anything that tells our story tends to depict, honestly. So I'm really going into that with the scalpel is amazing. Yeah. And Jess, thank you, because you've really written a book that kind of presents that questions to us as Americans. And so I think that you'll be just fine taking on a quick series of questions in our next segment that we like to call the lightning round.
Crash Thunder.
Nice. So this one is one of my personal favorites. Honestly, we're going to ask you 3 questions, and if you answer them correctly, then one of our lucky viewers on the StreamYard will receive the prize of all prizes, the book of all books, Americanon. It's available now also here at Charm City Books. Jess, are you ready to play the lightning round?
Born ready.
Hey, let's get into it then. Question number 1. Who gets to decide what a good American is?
Well, unfortunately, historically, it's been older white men of the born-again Christian persuasion.
Boo. Oh, wait, sorry.
Yes.
We can boo. We can boo.
We can boo right now. Yeah, we can boo. Yes. But I love that we are kind of taking back the reins on that definition, and the power dynamics have truly begun to shift. Thankfully, over the time.
I hope so.
Question number 2. What is a book that you would say would be a good template for the American landscape that we actually hope for?
This is a tough one because I think a lot of the books that are accurate about the American landscape are not particularly hopeful. But I would say maybe Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates would be one, and the new book by George Packer, Last Best Hope.
Oh yeah, that's definitely on my to-read list too.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that when I was thinking of what my answer to this question would be.
Yeah, what are your answers? I was curious. It's a hard question.
You said, huh?
What are your answers? I'm curious.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, for me, Baldwin is the easy answer because he's very critical of America, and I think that we, as Americans, despite your demographic, have the right to be critical. Therefore, should. It kind of presents this almost Judaic wrestling with your faith, your beliefs, your system, or what have you, and allowing that discourse to kind of help propel everything better. But then outside of that, I also too am kind of picking up a lot more Coates these days, but also, I mean, I could get on this answer for a long time. even people like reading the series of Stacey Abrams' leadership books.
Oh yeah, good one.
Like specifically her books on leadership, as I think really kind of presented to people who don't come from the born-again Christian cis white male backgrounds. How can we actually step into those positions that they've been holding for so long, which I think is something that's going to be necessary in order to get us to that future that we all hope for.
Sure.
But that's probably my answer today. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay, so question number 3 and the final one would be: what are some of the figures and/or books that you looked into that didn't make it into the book, into American?
Yeah, so there were a few that were left on the cutting room floor. Carl Sagan and Cosmos I was interested in, but yeah, I know it wasn't quite the same thing because he's not really. I don't think he was actively thinking about how do we make an ideal American. He was more thinking about science, so I didn't think it quite worked. The other one was the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous by Bill Wilson, because that sold like 35 million copies, and it was a huge bestseller in the 30s and during the Depression. He's fascinating. Oh no, I was just gonna say he used to take acid with Aldous Huxley. So.
Oh well, yeah. Nice.
All right.
That's a fun fact about AA.
Right, exactly. But the alcohol. Oh, hey, listen, go for it. Or don't. Right, this is the whole point. But yeah. Awesome. Just on that note, I think it's safe to say that you are our lightning round champion.
Yeah, Jess!
Awesome. Joe, who was our lucky prize winner today?
Brandon, our lucky prize winner today is none other than the unfunny one, who asked this great question. Hello, what would you say the most interesting thing you came across or learned is? Jess, you want to take a second to answer that little bonus question?
Love it. That's a tough one because there's a lot of interesting things, but I'm going to go for a random one, which I enjoyed, which is that there was a tuberculosis-fueled vampire panic in Massachusetts in the early 19th century. And a man named Bram Stoker came to visit Thoreau and said, hey, what's going on in your town? And he said, people think there are vampires because everybody has tuberculosis. And then Bram Stoker went home and wrote Dracula. So there's a fun fact for you.
Oh, wow. Wow, Boston, Massachusetts, between the witch trials and vampires, they're just kind of scared.
They love a supernatural moment.
Oh, yeah, clearly.
And congratulations to the unfunny one who's been watching on Facebook. You can send us an email, joe@charmcitybooks, for your chance to get a copy of Jess's new book, Americanin. Thank you, unfunny one, for watching at home.
Yes, thank you for watching. And thank you, Jess, again for joining us. Before we get back to all of the rest of the day all the tasks that the rest of the day has for us, for you being all the way over in France, that means a couple more glasses of wine, maybe. What's next for you?
Having a mini existential crisis about what to do next, and then maybe eating a popsicle.
Nice. Perfect. Are there any organizations or causes that you want to take the chance to shout out?
Yes. So I love the IDB Well Society that supports investigative journalists, which is something we always need more of. And then I also support the Oceanic Preservation Society because I'm a big whale guy. And it's all about, as the name says, preserving the oceans, which is also something we should do.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jess. Jess McHugh is a literary scholar that takes the story and puts it within another story and teaches you a lot about America with her book, Americanin, that is available right here, right now at Charm City Books. Thank you, Jess, for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for braving the wilds of social media to spend a few moments with us. Once again, please stay hydrated. It was a pretty nice day out here in Baltimore, but you can still always have more water. Get vaccinated. This COVID thing is doing something crazy still. Please look after yourself, wash your hands, and we'll see you next week right here on another episode of Between Two Succulents. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah, great.